Oh, here's Dan.
Hey guys, I'm sorry I lost track of the time.
Uh,
The,
and
the
we're
community
all
for,
here looking for an explanation.
Ah, yes. I'm
the
sorry.
community forum seems to have disappeared.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I didn't know that. God, I am just a
We've
fallen.
got the conflicted copies from Tim
All right,
going back to March 18th, but
let me open the well, it's taking its time opening the book club at all for me right
uh,
now.
yeah, I was worried we were canned. I logged in a few minutes ago and I was like, no, nobody's here. I was worried
Yes, no, I apologize. I'm
you have a life.
working through some technical issues, but I had lost track of time. Yeah, community forum, community forum, community forum.
Kim's community. I was editing it last night
Uh-huh.
to add votes to the books.
Okay.
Um,
So it's your fault.
it could be.
Let me, got it. And I haven't updated. Let me look at it a different way in Dropbox. Let's see. Indian Book Club. Community forum, community forum, community forum, 318.
Yeah.
It still calls it Tim's inflicted copy. Um, yeah, that seems to be the most recent one in the yeah, it does seem to have
Is
disappeared.
there is there a concept of a Dropbox trash bin?
Yeah, let me look.
Or even history. Yeah. I mean, in the history, it's not showing.
hmm
It would
last
show if it had been deleted, I assume. So,
last 7 days.
yeah.
Um, book suggestions edited 7 days ago.
Which might have been, I don't know if that was me or not.
7 days ago would have been the 11th.
Yeah. I think it's when you put up but I think you put hey, we're going to vote
In the forum, right?
in the
And
Yeah,
forum.
that's where I was editing yesterday.
yeah, yeah, right. So that wouldn't be, yeah, so the book suggestions wouldn't help us at all. But anyway, let's see. Schedule for Nexus. Welcome today. Okay, so schedule for Nexus. Chris edited a minute ago. Welcome start here. Chris edited 7 minutes ago.
I
Books.
think I may have found it.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh,
So
did it get filed somewhere?
it looks like John Mayo may have deleted it on the 17th, which was yesterday at 8:43 p.m. And probably Demshirt did it accidentally. Let me see
Yeah.
if
Oh,
I
yeah,
can.
there it is.
I will click the restore button and hopefully it will show up and look like what we expect it to look
It
like.
does look like what we expect it to look like. Yes, thank you. Wow.
There was another one that I created and deleted 10 minutes ago, but I was trying to find it, so I created a link for it and then clicked on it, hoping it would just magically open, and that didn't work. So there is another deleted one in there, but it's totally empty.
Uh-huh. Okay.
But and to do this for future, I will mention I opened up the web
Yeah.
version of
There's a
Dropbox,
deleted files thing.
went to our file and then deleted files and found two or three. So
So it's
Nice.
crazy that the app, which is integrated or whatever,
Doesn't
doesn't do
do that.
that.
yeah,
But
that was how I looked at it first too, was
Yeah.
the quick and
Yeah.
dirty way.
Uh-huh.
So
Well, and I looked at it in my file explorer, so that didn't help at all. Yeah. So, um,
Well, it
okay.
helped a little.
I
It
keep meaning
confirmed
to
what we all saw.
Yeah. Right.
Just not
Every
nothing,
time.
but
Right.
not a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So Eric, I see 3 votes for
So
you.
I was unclear on what you intended by ranked choice. Should I be doing 1, 2, 3?
Maybe that might help.
All right. Well, now that makes it harder. Thanks.
Let me
Well, you don't
suggest
have to do it
something.
right this second.
Let me suggest something from a sort of, again, sort of technical-ish thing.
Mhm.
Instead of editing the individual entries, we do like each one of us do a line for ourselves.
Mhm.
Okay.
Because that way we won't be overwriting the same text continuously, and also it gives us that ranked choice thing.
All right.
So I would just add a line after. I would just add a line at the top of like my votes. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Yeah.
Once I see one person doing that, then everybody else will.
Right. Right. Okay. And yeah, and things have been hopping along here. So it's I've started packing, as you can kind of see behind me. Um, I'm getting ready to move out to Northern California, northern-ish California, North Central Valley, in about a month, a little more than a month, and looks like I got a job.
Oh, that's
Oh,
good.
really?
Yeah, yeah.
Like confirmed.
Contracts?
I'll do the background check and stuff at the end of May when I arrive. And yeah, and I'll be teaching 3 year-long courses in the dual enrollment program. So I'll be teaching for the community college, but in the high school, which is right next door to the community college. And so that's kind of a start, and that's sort of like half of an adjunct load, and then she's going to try to find me additional courses in the system. But I will be teaching full time online for
Mhm.
Minnesota State, so I don't really need more. I mean, really, what I was hoping to do was kind of jam my foot in the door, which I think this will accomplish.
Didn't you meet with one of the deans or something
Yeah.
on a trip a couple months? Is this the same
Yeah,
process?
yeah, this is the same. Yeah, this is the same person. She connected me up with the coordinator of the dual enrollment program.
Nice.
Yeah. So
I forget. Have you lived in California before?
nope. No, my parents have lived in Woodland for 35 years, and I've visited a lot.
So yeah, you've got people.
Yeah.
Is your sister out there or no?
Yeah, she's in Sacramento.
Okay.
Oh yeah, so you're like basically going to join up with your family.
Yes, yeah, yeah. So
Nice.
we'll all be together once again, yeah, after. And they've lived in California. It's kind of weird because we think of ourselves as New Englanders, as Massachusetts people, but they've lived out there for longer than they've lived anyplace else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
September will be 30 years for me, but from recent experience, I can tell you it occasionally can be trial by fire.
Hmm.
Have you have you kept account of that joke?
No, I think that's the first time I've made
Oh,
it.
all right.
All
At
right.
least in this group.
Before that, it
No,
was
just in general,
too
like,
soon. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, the level of like morbid jokes I have about this, I should be writing them down actually, probably, because yeah, that's no, I grew up and when I was in college, I spent several years as an EMT and enmeshed in a culture of like just
Sure.
macabre jokes
Right.
as
Oh,
a
sure.
result of
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
culture.
Survival technique.
Yeah.
Um,
Campbell's humor. Yeah.
so yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So,
I
so
mean, I wouldn't tell that joke locally.
No.
yeah. Right. Right. You have to know your,
Well, I no, I wouldn't do it just
right.
because it's one of those that's just it's such a triggering thing still that
Right.
Yeah.
like
I
Mhm.
got my votes in.
Oh, nice. All right.
I was trying not to have conflicted copies, so I steered away from it for a minute.
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right.
Chris, I think you're the most mathematically inclined, so we'll let you
Oh, I
figure out the algorithm.
um,
I think it's odd that a group of us would want to read a white biography of Hoover.
yeah. Yeah.
Know the enemy. No. I don't think it's right to call him the enemy.
Yeah. No, I think actually that would be
They're all good books.
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we could probably do any book on the long, long list of book suggestions
Hmm.
and find meaning or make meaning.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's probably true.
Am I guessing? Are we deciding this today, or are you going to keep it open for another few days?
I think we'll decide it today since nobody seems to have tried to weigh in the week.
Unless
except
John was failing.
who's the guy who deleted it accidentally? You said somebody deleted.
Who'd you say it was?
John
Um,
Mayo?
John
Oh, yeah.
Mayo. Yeah.
It's been a long time since John actually came to the
Didn't he show
meeting,
up?
but he's been sort of popping into the community, into the Obsidian
No.
every once in a while.
Do you have a mailing list of us?
Yeah,
You could.
I have an old one.
But he's got it packed away in the boxes behind him.
No, I've got it. I do have it in Obsidian,
On
so
one of those hard
in
drives.
my own personal vault. So I could put a call out. It's been a while since
Yeah, it might remind people.
yeah.
Okay, I am out of the voting now, so Dan, if you want to, and then we can tally things
All
up.
right, I will. Okay.
Who's the MSNBC or CNN guy that does the big screens?
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. At least, yeah.
Yeah.
And in here,
I was disappointed. I saw Microsoft is discontinuing, not disappointed, is way too strong. I was intrigued to see that Microsoft is discontinuing the Surface Hub, which was their second or third go at the giant interactive display for enterprises.
Mm.
yeah.
We looked at them. They were also like tremendously expensive.
All right, I'm in.
Any surprises?
No, I think we're all.
No,
I'm not sure how to make the choice from that, but
yeah. I think I'll just give them reverse weight,
reverse
right?
weight,
So
yeah.
a one gets 3 and a 3 gets 1.
Well, the way we do it in the mayoral elections here.
How do we do? Yeah, how do
Yeah.
you?
Who among us lives with ranked choice voting?
Yes.
Will.
This guy, somebody who's got two thumbs right here, is whoever doesn't. So basically, if nobody wins, if nobody wins the first round,
Uh-huh.
then no, actually, if nobody they go to the last round, I think, right? Yeah. If nobody wins the first, if nobody is a oh Jesus, I'm gonna look this up because I guess it's clever and it actually gets things in a good way. Let me see, ranked choice voting. How does it work? Okay, so ranked choice voting. How does it work? All right. So all first choices are counted. If a candidate receives more than 50% of the first choices, that candidate wins. Nobody did, right?
Okay.
So nobody voted. If no candidate earns more than 50, then we continue in round. At the end of each round, the last place candidate is eliminated, and voters who chose that candidate now have their vote counted for their next choice. Okay, so the next choice is so basically it's second round, I guess. So Woodard got 2 second round votes. And you know what? Wow, it looks like Woodard. Am I right here?
No, I don't know. I would say because in terms of totals, what the totals that I got is White 8, Barber 3, Woodard 7 and Reich 6 if I just flipped the values.
Yeah.
Assigned
That's
3 points to a 1.
That's what I got to.
right.
Yeah.
All right.
I will confess, I threw it into Claude chat
Yeah.
Mhm.
since we're talking about AI,
Ah, nice.
and it agrees, I think. White 8, White 8, Woodard 7, Reich 6. This is
Yep.
using a Borda count. I'm going to have to research. And of course, it doesn't give me links to describe any of these.
Mhm. I'm
So
satisfied with
instant runoff voting, which is what you suggested, will
Yeah.
count each voter's top choice. If no candidate has a majority,
Right.
50% plus 1, eliminate the last place candidate, redistribute those votes to each ballot's next ranked choice.
There was no last place choice in the first round because everybody got one vote.
Right.
So then it's the second round, which is fundamental. I guess, the second round is White got 2 and nobody else got, I think, anyway, I think one way or the other, I think we agree White won.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Looks that way.
Herbert Hoover!
We have a winner.
Yeah.
White. All right. I'm kind of surprised
Biography.
The
longest of the
biography of
books.
Hoover. Wow. Okay.
But when it, I will say, I was moved by Will's advocacy for considering Hoover as an interesting topic.
Mhm.
Whatever,
Yeah.
3 weeks ago,
Yep.
3 sessions ago.
I mean,
And
I
all
agree.
because I mentioned a Latin text he
Right?
translated.
Yeah, exactly. And our intellectual president, right? Our
Yeah.
intellectual and industry aligned or industry experienced president.
well,
Yeah.
not only that, I mean, I know that he was important in sort of he helped in sort of pre-war China,
Mhm.
pre-revolutionary China. He was an important figure in like I forget exactly, sort of before he was president.
Yeah.
And,
he was kind of responsible for preventing starvation in Europe
Yeah.
after the First World War as well. Yeah.
yeah, but he had a huge role. He went to China, and
Mhm.
he was a private businessman and had a huge role there.
Right.
A very benevolent one,
Mhm.
relatively speaking.
Yeah. Yeah. That whole period of Chinese history between the Boxer Rebellion and the Revolution in 1911 is interesting too.
Have you read Barbara Tuchman's Stillwell and the American Experience in China?
Mhm.
Yeah, it's like the most academic, pretty much, of anything Tuchman ever did.
Mm.
And it's just basically taken from the diaries of this guy who, General Stillwell eventually, who he first went to China as Lieutenant Stillwell or whatever for U.S. military, U.S. Army, like in 1890 something, and just kept going back in there. And eventually, but he kept extensive journeys, but he was this ongoing guy
Interesting.
throughout sort of China.
Huh.
I must have read it 20 years ago because my grandmother had a paperback copy and I inherited it, and I read it. It's like, oh my God, this is great.
Mhm.
So highly recommend.
Cool.
But again, related to, because obviously there's overlap with Hoover because
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
and Stillwell, it ends up
And with Smedley Butler, actually, for that matter.
Stillwell ends up being like the guy in charge of the Allies integration, Allies, work with in China during World War II as well. And he's there until the revolution.
Mhm.
So great book. Highly recommend.
It's curious. I have almost all of her big books, and I don't think I've ever heard of that one. Oddly.
Yeah. It's the least sort of popular fiction. But also the title. I mean, Stillwell in the American Experience, it's not her other stuff of like, The Last Tower or The March
Right.
of Fallen,
Yeah.
this is,
Yeah.
or even the
Distant
Zimmerman
Era.
telegram, which is nice and easy. It's,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. So,
Oh, and to honor Tim, who's not with us, I will mention that literally last night I'm watching, and it's been a month probably since I've had a West Wing episode on, but we ran across the episode where Bartlett walks in to fire his entire cabinet, and he said, I've had the most stable cabinet since Hoover, but that may have been because there were no other good jobs lying around. So, to Tim.
Well, yeah, so here's to Tim. I hope he's doing all right.
Yeah.
So the end of Nexus. We kind of talked a little bit about nine, I guess, kind of leaving last week. This idea of liberal democracy, uh, which seemed,
Liberal in the classical sense.
yeah, liberal in the classical.
The way the economists and people talk about
Well,
it. Not,
speaking of liberal versus illiberal, which is kind of a new word in the lexicon,
Mhm.
I'm sure it popped up somewhere 40 years ago and somebody's dusted it off. But Orban fell apart last week.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Um,
And is he accepting those results pretty much?
Yes.
So far? Yeah.
yeah.
That was the
Our,
impression I got. But I have
and our
close.
our current hamburger loving president seems to be slowly falling apart. Are we going to make book on either death or the 25th Amendment just for fun?
Uh, I'm not, I'm
I,
not,
I
I'm not, I'm
my
not getting
my
involved
take.
in prediction markets.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I don't believe in prediction markets, and I don't believe that that's a prediction that either will come to light.
I don't know.
I
My
think neither will surface
He
my bet
will at
is
some point. There's
Hmm.
this wonderful piece.
within term. I think Chris. You're defining
oh
That was
no,
within
the
I
term.
assumption. Yeah.
I think the cause of death is going to be aspiration, and it's going to happen within 30 days.
Good grief.
Weirdly,
Wow.
Have you
his
seen
That's weirdly
the
specific.
have you seen the McSweeney's piece from about 6 months ago of when it happens?
Mm.
I will find the link and put it in the chat. Um, yeah, it was chat. Where's the
Oh, I've
chat?
got it.
You got
Yeah,
it? Yeah.
November, Tom Ellison.
Yep. I'm just putting it in the chat now. There we go.
Cool. All right. Thanks.
Yeah. Doesn't say it doesn't use anybody's name or even what might happen. Just
Mm. Wow. All right. Interesting. So this discussion of liberal democracies, old-fashioned liberalism, I guess I had already, I think last week, sort of complained a little bit that it seemed just a touch ahistorical to me in that it seemed to kind of assume that before this age of AI and heavy surveillance, democracy kind of did operate in the way that we like to remember it, sort of as assumed in the definition, right? And I think that doesn't necessarily hold. And it might be one of the, it kind of might be one of the main ways that I sort of disagree with Harari.
Wait, which piece doesn't hold?
Well, that we had a well operating democracy where people actually were effective in kind of directing and navigating these changes rather than just having kind of choices presented to them within a very because my impression of it is that there are some exceptions, especially sort of initiative and referendum kind of states, but generally we're it's more of a kind of a football game rather than
Yeah.
a kind of a real we're going to use the electorate to kind of discern a direction and change it and I see that going all the way back to kind of the Gilded Age at the end of the 19th century.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of odd that we most of our big decisions, in a general sense, because there are crazy things going on now that identity politics is driving
Yeah.
directions, but it seems in the past that the system two thinkers within the government will hash out and look at policies and make recommendations. And then you have a president and a Congress and maybe some ratification years later by the Supreme Court or the court system will make a decision. And then that decision bundled up with 100 or 1,000 other decisions gets packaged into a Republican column or a Democrat column,
Right.
and then the gut reaction system one of the electorate gives ratification to that
And you're
initial.
talking Kahneman system one, system two,
So
right?
yeah, so Kahneman, Tversky, system one, system two. But lately, are the electorate and the politics and social media and all the nuttiness, I it's much rarer that in broader society I see people saying, they start to get into some depth of what's going on or why, but the gut reaction of the electorate, especially in the social media and broad media, tends to wash out all the kind of the better angels
Hmm.
of deeper thought. So it's like, hey, we're gonna, and the extreme example is ICE. We're just going to crack down and just
Right.
no one in the electorate generally expected or thought, hey, it's going to happen the way that it has. And it seems to have slowed down and quieted now because it was getting too loud. Um,
Hasn't slowed down that much.
No.
it's a continuing apace, but they're not just sending in 4,000 jackbooted thugs to drag people out the way they were a couple months ago in
Yeah.
Minnesota, as an
Nobody's
example.
been shot in Minneapolis recently. Yeah.
And it's not pushing up against the level of state governor saying, well, we're going to call in the National Guard
Right.
or do other things or use local police to protect against the federal government coming in.
Hmm.
Um,
Well,
so that kind of knee-jerk reaction seems to have fixed itself a little bit without an election happening, but
yeah.
I mean,
But in
that's
terms of the bundles, one of the things that, and I guess, I mean, it's not 100% one thing or 100% the other, certainly. But it seems to me that back in the day, we used to imagine that kind of liberal democracy worked, and that there were exceptions in places, and we called that machine politics, right? And so, in Tammany Hall back in the 19th century in New York or in Chicago, there was a political machine that we sort of imagined as being kind of anomalous and being a corruption of what we really wanted to see happening. And I think that has altered, right? Because these things that have sort of snuck in, right? This, the way that the federal government was deploying ICE and Border Patrol in places like Minneapolis certainly was not something that there had been, kind of vigorous public debate. This war that isn't really a war that we're maybe having, maybe not having in Iran, right? Where Congress didn't even really take advantage of its opportunity to weigh in with a war powers resolution or not. They just kind of punted on that. Suggest to me that that something has changed, right? And that this idea of liberal democracy is no longer really as effective. And so I agree with Harari on that. I guess my quibble, and maybe it is just a quibble, is that I think that there was, and maybe it is really only a quibble, just that I think that there was a little bit more that was sort of papered over and that was ignored in the kind of the mechanistic workings of the powers behind, and the sort of presentation of a limited range of choices, right? Of the what South Park called the giant douche and the turd sandwich. right?
I think I think, taking, well, again, there's two pieces there. One, obviously, is, where we are now is a lot different from where we were when we were all growing up. Basically, the Cold War, made everything easy because, we were all, the differences were some individual policies, but, that you could be, the people who were either, pro-gun or pro-life, pro-choice, anti-gun, lower taxes, less taxes. They generally weren't screaming, they would, at least in the legislatures and the like, find a thing, because we were all fighting against the overall, we all fundamentally united against the Reds.
Yeah.
So that's one. So that's the past. That's a different place. That's also, in a world when we had, the fairness doctrine, and we didn't have, Murdoch's empire and blah 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 blah.
Well,
Mhm.
that bigger difference, though, I think, is we had a big scary thing to all be worried about, all of
Yes.
us.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we don't have a big scary thing, so we can all focus on smaller, less scary things.
Sure. But,
Well,
but,
and
but,
it was sort of our first maybe run in with, kind of that existential, nuclear standoff sort of thing. But there were also, I mean, there was also a lot of kind of falsehood in there, right? So there was this, us versus the commies, and we imagined we understood what that meant, but then people like Joe McCarthy came along, waving his memo with no real names on it.
Yeah.
And
But
so much the
Will wasn't about
commies
to
we
make
were
a
against,
big,
we were against
he was
the
building to something.
Russians. It was not even so much the commies, it was the Russians. It was the Soviets, the commies, and but anyway, that's one piece. But the other thing that I think
do
gets
you think it
back
was the
to
Russians? Do you really think? I mean,
Russians and commies, the
I mean,
Russians, it was the Soviets, it was the iron, the
by the 50s,
what was the word?
there was
The
China,
Iron Curtain.
right?
We were scared of the Iron Curtain, and the
We were
people on
scared
the
in
other side
Europe.
of
We
the
were
Iron
scared of
Curtain,
the Iron Curtain, but in China,
they were on the Iron Curtain too.
I mean,
We
nut
hated
jobs
them too.
wanted to nuke the Chinese during the Korean
Yeah,
War.
yeah. I mean, but that's actually, but again, that's what the specifics that we had sort of common. Okay, we're scared of those people. We did have a common, but that's actually not, I think, so much of what you're getting into, Dan, which is the idea of, um, does, was liberal democracy ever really a thing? And, whether or not it is now, but, has it been in the past? And I think your example here is you're talking about how, well, there's machine politics and probably some corruption and other things, but I don't think that those are necessarily antithetical to so-called liberal democracy. It's kind of like, with Clausewitz, saying, war is just, a different version of politics. It's a different. I mean, politics is the art. It is, how groups, interest groups, get them, are, work these things out, right? And just because we got, again, you can call it a machine politics. You can call it the next thing, just because a labor union has some corruption in it doesn't mean it's still not actually largely fighting for,
Right.
fighting for factory workers, et cetera.
Right.
Just because Cesar Chavez was a horrible human being didn't mean that, what he did in terms of actually, getting representation for farm workers and for people and for particularly Mexican Americans, doesn't mean that didn't really happen. It wasn't actually a movement that mattered. I mean, the personal foibles of leaders, or even the corruption of organizations, doesn't mean that we still don't have this, more, dialectical, we can say Kantian or Marxist, I don't care, tension between, interest groups that are sort of trying to get their stuff there. And I mean, I go back instead more to, I mean, his definition, at least, of it. I think he points out some good things where he's talking about, benevolence. What is it? The big things is benevolence,
Benevolence, decentralization.
mutuality and transparency, right? Is that the have I got the word right for transparency? Oh, change and rest, whatever that
Change it,
means.
yeah, change and rest. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, he's and I think those are those. I think I don't. I think that they're even though the exact mechanism of we all most people don't think about politics,
Mhm.
but they do think about anyway. So that's my long nickel of it. And the decentralization is a big part of that also, by the way, particularly
Mhm.
in American stuff,
Right.
because we have very different laws in different states. We have different laws in different cities or towns,
Mhm.
that are, and those are, different laws, different tax structures. People
Mhm.
are, so I think, at the very least, that part is there, or maybe
Yeah.
it's even still there, I mean,
Or you can even look at a lot of those things as like little mini experiments in a city that
Mhm.
move to the state or the state that move to the national government. So,
Right.
as an example, you've got
ranked choice voting in New York City.
well, no, it's probably the better example. And then it got dirtied, but our favorite Latter-day Saint, governor of Massachusetts
Yeah,
comes up
yeah.
with a healthcare plan.
Romney care.
Obama picks it up
Mm-hmm.
and carries it on to the national level.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
But then, who gets credit for it? How does it work? Who does it help or hurt? And then suddenly there's way more chum in the water. And
Mhm.
I'm not sure how there wasn't, you know, what happened to the chum. I don't think I ever saw a good analysis of was there even any chum in Massachusetts when it passed there and became a thing there that it should have
I
tipped
don't
us
remember.
off, other than it's a black president who's positing it, and we just can't have that.
Yeah.
Um,
I,
or
I
or
don't I don't
even that
remember.
it was
Place
this
and
super blue state, even though it has a Republican governor.
Mhm.
You know,
Well, and that's the weird thing about Boston, about Massachusetts politics. Yeah. Uh,
yeah, it's a
but
whole nother.
it's a whole nother thing. Yeah.
I'll,
But
I'll, Although based on our conversation, I will take Dan's machine politics and I'll reframe it as collateralized debt politics in the
there you
way that I've talked about. We package up all these things in
go.
tranches of politics,
Right.
and then we go and we pull a lever and vote kind of left or right, or we knee jerk back and forth,
Right.
you know.
For
Um,
bundles of things that don't necessarily really even go together, except that in some type of schismogenetic way they've been talked about.
but
But
the issue is what happens when, the crash in 2008 occurs again, but from a political spec perspective rather than so something like, you know, choice or, abortion,
uh,
which,
or the AI bubble.
I think more than 80% of people think abortion is an okay thing. And then even within that, it's kind of a question of is it, 0 weeks? Is it 12 weeks? Is it 25 weeks? Is it even more?
Right.
Um,
yeah.
Yeah, and and
so
and and all of the most egregious, sort of headline grabbing arguments about that are on those extremes and not in the
not
middle.
in an even middle. I
Yeah,
mean, when you have Ireland with all the Irish Catholics,
yeah,
voting, and even there, it's like a 60 or more percent people like, okay, we're all right with abortion
right,
or some variation of it. And
right,
then somehow these hardline far right Christians who are a minority in the country seem to have totally destroyed it. But that's one of those, you know, weird pieces of debt sitting in the package that can explode the whole thing.
right, right. But
Um,
but but to go back to his words, mutuality and kind of decentralization. One of the things, back, a couple minutes ago when we were talking about sort of the labor union thing, right? So do we, I think, I was going to say, do we want to, but what I really meant was, I think we ought to make a distinction between things that got centralized because atomized, responses to power don't work, right? You have to have some type of countervailing unit, right, that can grab enough power to be effective in the conversation. But in the context of that mutuality, what do we want to say about things like labor unions versus things like individual multi-billionaires or going on trillionaires who move entire segments or sectors of the economy all by themselves.
Yeah. Well, even more so because the mutuality thing, the idea of some of what a union is doing is they're collecting data for the people at the bottom to see what all the people at the top are doing and providing a more realistic idea of we know how the company is doing and how much of the value we're adding as employees is
Mhm.
going to the bottom line, but then all of that bottom line value is then being sucked out of the top
Right.
versus some of it being pushed down to us. Now, there are cases certainly where, in fact, I was reading some history on Olivetti, and Olivetti closed a plant in Spain in 1996. And a couple weeks before, there were negotiations between the union and the organization, and they said, well, if we're going to keep this plant open, you guys need to take, like a 13% pay cut. And the union said no, and then within a month, it's unsustainable. We can't keep the factory open, so
Sure.
everybody loses their job, and we just move on with life.
Mhm.
Sure.
But more often than not, that's an extreme case, and it's usually the case that the top is saying, "Hey, things are going horribly bad," but really they're going swimmingly,
Yeah.
and you're not really in trouble. And even if you did take a pay cut and things aren't going to turn around usually at that point when you're saying, "Hey, you guys need to take pay cuts for us to keep the plant open." At the same time, the senior executives aren't taking pay cuts for themselves.
Mhm.
That's a dead company just swimming in the water.
Though there are, I think, specific examples. I mean, I think of the U.S. auto industry during the financial crisis or leading up to it or whatever. I mean, my memory, vague and probably incorrect, though, but I think it's right, is, that most of, the big three all renegotiated and very openly renegotiated with their unions. And executives took pay cuts, but, everybody agreed, okay, the only way we're going to keep these things going is if everybody, if we renegotiate some stuff. But, there was, again, that transparency situation of, it's a reasonable negotiation. But regardless of that, I mean, when he's talking about mutuality, I think he's more talking though about the citizens have understanding of what's happening in the government.
Yeah.
And so that's that balance between
Well,
the
and
government.
mutuality and surveillance. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but the issue recently seems to be that we've lost a huge swath of journalists
Yes.
and
Mhm.
newspapers and magazines and serious people who have resources to throw at the problem to dig in to the data that is available or isn't.
Particularly at the local level, and that's
Yeah.
that's where it's a huge thing. There's
Right.
been
Yeah.
a complete death of local. Most government happens at the local level,
Mhm.
and there's been this complete collapse of local journalism.
Yeah.
You don't have somebody who's actually reporting on the city council. Saying, "Oh, where the deals are made, where most of the deals that are
Yeah.
affecting people are made."
Yeah.
And that made me think too of the case of Dixon, Illinois, where the city treasurer was walking away with, I think, tens of millions of dollars
To do horses or something, right?
Right.
and
Yeah. She
was
was a
investing it
horse.
somewhere
Right.
else.
Yeah.
But if there were transparency from city to city, you could look at that city and surrounding cities of a similar size and say, hey, what do their budgets look like? Where are they putting money? And one city, yes, you got a river going through your city, you're going to put some money to put walls for the banks of the river or deal with how that river interacts with your city versus another city 10 miles away that doesn't have that feature. But in broad aggregate, you can at least look at the numbers and say, hey, we're either under investing in infrastructure, we're over investing it, or we're leaking it out because there is somebody cheating the system and we're not getting the value out of it for what we're putting in. But that kind of high level kind of mutuality and transparency in even local governments could be phenomenally more interesting going forward. And it's a similar thing is kind of in the Department of Education can collect and aggregate statistics of what education looks like in all 50 states
Mhm.
and allow you to say, oh, this experiment that's happening in Georgia right now could be an interesting sea change for everyone else.
Yeah.
And we can help. We don't need to force it, but if other states are interested in, we can help facilitate it both up and down. But
Mhm.
when you destroy a department like that who's aggregating those statistics and no one else is aggregating them anymore, no longer have the chance to do transparency or any kind of mutuality,
Right.
which
Well,
is
and again, I would go back to this, to this thing that bothers me about, sort of setting, this aggregation of tiny, 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 in a labor union or in a, in a public advocacy, sort of a campaign versus, and the example that I just put in the chat is, the Senate just voted to allow, these dipshits to go forward with this mine near the boundary waters. And it's a, and that just sort of illustrates for me how the differentials in power work, right? It was so much easier for for Polymet just to kind of keep their foot on that
Mhm.
accelerator, right? Than it was for this, for all of these little public interest groups and activists and stuff to, to sort of keep the, keep their constituencies, excited about this and up to date on, on what's going on and all of that. So there's clearly, kind of a mismatch in the power that's, that can be deployed. And so
Money is power.
yeah, and so I
Well,
think
it's
we have
the
to we have to
pipeline.
watch
It's
out
the it's
for
that
for saying that this is that these forces are sort of evenly matched.
yeah.
of course they're not evenly matched. Well they can be.
But that's
It's
sort of
just
an assumption of the liberal democracy thing.
well, but again, I think we're back to are we whether or not we have always been you know, I don't think we can necessarily I think whether or not we currently are in a particularly liberal democracy is a big question.
Mhm.
Whether or not we have been in the past, I mean, at the same time that we're talking about that, I mean, during the 70s, under Nixon, the Clean Air and Clean Water Act
We
got
have the
passed.
EPA, right?
You know,
It's
I
a
mean,
great Republican choice, you know.
Who's
under in the
conservative in
six,
the old fashioned, yeah, in the old
yeah,
fashioned way.
I mean, I mean Nelson Rockefeller and a bunch of there's been different times of different levels of public participation and the like. But
Mhm.
listen, right now, is it a great? Well, unions are historically weak, and they're one of the big people to push back.
Mhm.
Again, as we've mentioned, sort of media has been gutted. Well, particularly local media that is going to be pushing back on that. Though, and I did read somewhere that actually the boundary waters thing can still be held up by a local judge. There's like sort of local authorities that can just say we're not going to permit this. They're not going to issue the permit. So it's not a done deal.
Right.
But part of it. But whether or not it's ever been liberal democracy, or certainly has there been liberal democracy in America in our lives, I think there has been.
Oh
Well,
yeah, I'll stipulate
the
that.
other the other issue at play here too is you can say, okay, there's socialism and pure socialism, but no country on the planet or polity has ever had pure socialism.
Right.
So it's when we say liberal democracy, it's a spectrum,
Mhm.
and the
Yeah.
liberal democracy that the US participates in is different from that Britain does or that Finland does or
Right.
anybody else, but they're all within some standard deviation of a thing that's called liberal
Mhm.
democracy. And the
Yeah.
question is, where on that spectrum are you staying relatively static? Are you, I would say America has made a knee-jerk shift kind of towards moving away from liberal democracy
Mhm.
in the
I mean,
last
Hungary,
decade. But, at what point do we get out of it and into some other thing?
Hungary before Orban was actually one of the economic stars, and there was a reason they got to go into the EU. Yeah,
Mhm.
there's a reason they got to join the EU because they actually were doing great as a liberal democracy. They were one of the, they were doing great economically, everything. Then Orban, 16 years the guy, or was it 20? I forget, but forever, took it into a very, very bad place. But it's going to go, I think it's a shifting.
Well,
Mhm.
how did he rise to power and then stay in power? Was it all economic driven? Because Harari here in chapter 9 makes the case. He kind of sets up an analogy of unemployment of like 25% in Weimar era Germany allows the Nazis to come in and through fear mongering push them into,
Uh-huh.
this totalitarian regime.
Right.
And then he sets up the analogy, what happens when AI unemploys all the people
Mhm.
and all the people lose jobs because AI is now doing all the what used to be the human thinking stuff that we used to do. If you have massive unemployment at 25% or more, and then he doesn't fill in the blank, he kind of leaves it open, which is to me, a little ingenuous that it's inducing the same type of fear and analogistically.
Well,
But
and
he
where he goes in that
specifically,
next paragraph, right, to this, yet no Hitler took over in the United States, no
right,
Lenin
yeah,
did either. And then
same
he talks
economic
about how
model.
great FDR was and how he made the US the global arsenal of democracy. Well,
Mhm.
okay, that wasn't the New Deal, that was the war. Right. So it required the Second World War in order to do that. But I think it does sort of beg the question, what was different in the US in the New Deal, many of which, many of the New Deal one, policies were decided to be unconstitutional. And not only because the Supreme Court was adversarial and Republican, but
Yes,
because they probably were
the
a little
social
bit
welfare things,
pushed
but
too
the big
far.
social welfare ones were,
Yeah,
I mean, we have Social Security.
right,
Yeah.
Well,
right.
and that wasn't the war so much as it was the crash and how do
Yeah.
you come
It
out
was
of
the
the
crash,
crash?
right? And so, but the, so this, I mean, if we define fascism as, sort of tight integration, of the economy with the government and cartelization and, sort of all of these things, we had a lot of those in America. What we didn't have was the the really extreme, and maybe it's because demographically we weren't, there wasn't a group that could sort of be targeted as a scapegoat, and there wasn't a group that could be, that could imagine itself as the folk, and create those very distinct, binaries, right? It was much more, up until 1924, it was much more of a nation of immigrants, right? So there were a lot of people. There were a lot of Germans. There were a lot of Italians. There were a lot of, all kinds of different ethnicities, and so it was much, there was much more diversity, that allowed for less of a kind of a of the things that we think of when we think of fascism and Nazism, right? In terms of the way that people imagine their groupings, right? There was less of that, but there was quite a bit of this, industrial policy, we might call it now, and organizing the economy, and certainly putting a bunch of Social Security, which the initial Social Security posters, they were almost always like old widow ladies, and it's like, we're going to protect these, these widows and orphans and stuff like that. And so so I think that
Which an early
he
Christian,
points out a question, but he doesn't 100% answer it.
yeah. Or there's more, the tough part is there's more complexity in a lot of these things than he is willing to admit. Although I think at kind of the broad top level, and I've spent a few minutes trying to think of on his list of benevolence, decentralization, mutuality, and the change and rest thing. I was like, okay, are there other things that are missing from that list that are big chunks of what's going on?
Mhm.
And it's hard to like fill those blanks in without a lot of heavy thought and heavy lift.
Yeah.
But it seems in kind of broad strokes, he's getting at least big chunks of the first level correct.
Yeah.
But then how do you then apply that to what may happen in the second, third, and fourth level decisions
Right.
as we go forward? And that's where that analogy between unemployment and Nazis and AI and whatever may come and
Right.
what happened in America early on is it's the second and third levels that determine where we move to or where we don't move to. So the progressives in the FDR era, because of the crash and because of the war, were able to massively shift progressively protections for the poor and the weak and health care and retirement
Mhm.
that I think broadly have been good for society.
Right.
We're able to sweep them up, whereas the current administration seems to be trying to do similar things. We're trying to like dramatically change what's going on in America in
Mhm.
a shift backward,
Yeah.
but there aren't the confounding wars and other things, even though presumably they may be trying to manufacture them. But there's been no, and I would say too, it's weird because I think the majority of Americans probably would say, I'm not pro-Iranian.
Mhm.
Small, tiny, tiny, minuscule pockets in, Los Angeles, let's say, there is a little Persia in several of them in Los Angeles. So there's a lot of expats who don't wish ill on old family members who are still there.
Sure.
But that's minuscule, and I think most of America would be against Iran broadly. But the way this war has been done, like a lot of people have come out and said, this is just the wrong way to do it,
Yeah. Yeah.
and aren't, so there isn't that, hey, this is the big enemy and we can all be against them in the same way that occurred in World War, II.
Yeah. Oh, true.
And it helped also in World War II.
And they haven't made
Again,
any effort to try and get a groundswell of support
Mhm.
for this war at all. It's just like,
Right.
Trump woke up one day and decided,
it'll be fine.
I'm going to follow Bibi Netanyahu into, crazy land.
Yep. Into crazy land. Yeah. Well, and one of the things, additionally, I think what maybe an additional word to add to his little list of words might be access, right? Because on the very next page, I think after the Hitler Lenin thing, he says that the biggest and most successful transformation in the job market in the 20th century was not technological invention; it was women. Right, half of the population. So so this access for women, and then I would add with the with
Civil
civil
rights.
rights in the 50s, minorities, right,
Yeah.
having additional access to not only work but to sort of all of the ways to participate in society, and
Become
that might be a
entrepreneurs.
thing that is different about the present moment. We're not talking about increasing access now. We're talking about it, everybody having less access and opportunity.
Yeah.
But I thought that was great. I kind of laughed and I thought, good for you. You noticed there was women.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, we talked a little about, I mean, I think I don't know. Where are we on his definition of democracy? Are you okay with it yet now, Dan? Or is it liberal democracy, or
Oh,
are you still have we or
I'm okay. I'm okay with it. I mean, as long as we sort of keep in the back of our minds that, that it is that it's a map and not the territory.
yeah, yeah.
Before we get away from the women and access question, I'll bring up the devil's advocate question of because women went into the workplace and got more access and more participation,
Mhm.
I would say generally we are better, but as a result of women being able to go into the workplace, a lot more have than possibly needed to
Mhm.
because we're such a capitalistic society and more.
Yeah.
But I think there are a lot of families who could live off of a single income and we could have better healthcare, educational, and other outcomes
Yeah.
if someone stayed. And it doesn't have to, we don't have to take the gendered perspective of it has to be
The
the
mom.
woman who stays in the home, it could be the man. And
Mhm.
I during the pandemic, I saw dozens of CEO female-led companies collapse and disappear because the woman had to quit her job to support the family in the home, even though the husband was unemployed, but the husband wasn't doing any of the home fire tending at all because they seemed dramatically incapable of even attempting to
Just
think about doing
refusing.
that.
I think it's more refusal.
Well,
Uh,
or refusal, or like, I don't have the tools to figure out how to do this because I never took a class in home economics to learn how to cook, or I don't want to change the diaper, whatever that is.
Yeah.
But giving the women access to some extent hurt the world and the economy in the US because now it's much harder to go back to some variation of which, the Republican or conservative view of let's keep what we had.
Mhm.
Keeping what we had would have been okay for the let's support the family and keep the core family. But the issue that was missing was the single mom who needed to work to support the family
well,
had no support.
there's a different issue, and that's the single mother. But I would again, I was raised by a single mother. Um, uh, I learned to cook when I was 8 because of it. But more, I think of sort of the counterexample of sort of again during on the other side of the Iron Curtain, two income families, but both mother and father working, was during sort of during the communist period, or whatever you want to call it, period. That was that was typical. You did not typically have a stay-at-home mother, and that access to do something other than being a housekeeper and child caregiver was something I think that's not necessarily an economic issue. I think there's I mean, I don't think it's primarily economically driven. I think people really want to have that, ability to express themselves by doing more than but hey, I mean,
Oh no,
insisting.
I'm
Yeah,
totally taking the, devil's
I think
advocate
you're
view
devil's
that it's
advocating, but
that shift was not necessarily all good.
Yeah.
I don't, it was certainly I mean, I've thought about this too of like, it's an experiment that again was all in our lifetime. It was an interesting experiment. I remember, just age wise, when my sister's 6 years older than I am. And when she went into high school, in I want to say 74, 75, something like that. When she went into high school, of her friend group, she was the only one whose parents were divorced. At the end of, by the time of her senior year in high school, all of her friend group had split groups. And again, and it was that we had this rather unique period in this sort of unique period in the 70s of this massive collapse of
Yeah,
well,
and no fault divorce
collapse
went
is the right
through.
term, but people who were stuck in the huge party, the taboo. Obviously, plenty of people got divorced before that. I am a third generation person of divorced. My grandparents, parents, and great grandparents on one side, all divorced, broken homes, divorced. Yeah. So it obviously happened in the day, but it became much, much more common, during particularly that period of this, this statistical, almost statistical blip of the 70s. And I think since then, right, marriage rate, divorce rates have gone down. Am I right? I'm guessing. I think I heard that somewhere, but that sort of unique collapse of the 70s and early 80s of divorces.
Well,
Um,
it's one of the things he underlines in this book is that systems that can adapt and
yeah,
change can become better.
Hmm.
yeah,
And what happened with divorce is systems for support for, hey, I can get a divorce and my life does not end, or I'm
yeah.
not, assigned to the dustbin of history because I'm now destitute and I have no way to support myself and my child, or
Another quick one, by the way, another date, I think it was 1975 or six or something, is when women could finally get credit card without being
Mm.
married.
Yep.
My mother actually had to, she had to, she tried to register me and my sister in the Indianapolis public schools. We lived there for like a year. And they wanted the signature of, they would not do it without the signature of the father.
Wow.
Uh, and
oh,
so, and she
and
had to
you
go through the Indiana Civil Liberties Union to say no. This is a divorce. I've got custody, and no. Yeah,
and you look forward to less than a generation from that, and I have a 14-year-old who's like saying, "Hey, I want my own bank account, and I
mm-hmm.
want you know, my own trading account. So if I want to day trade, I
Oh,
could."
Jesus,
And generally, she
say
can.
no.
She needs a parent's signature as a custodial account until she's at least 18 to be able
Hmm.
to do that. But that may
It's
that may
different.
be a good thing because
Yeah.
God forbid she make $10 million and then like, hey, I'm leaving the house. I don't need you people anymore.
Yep. Get
We're talking,
emancipated.
but in my mother's case, she was an adult.
Yeah.
My
Oh yeah.
mother was an
Totally.
Right.
adult in her, who this point was in her 30s. So who
Which
couldn't
was
get a
just
credit card.
egregious that that should ever have been the
Yeah,
thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
So, yeah. So moving on, the rise of digital empires and all of that.
hmm. Are we going to skip over the conservative suicide?
You don't have to.
I just liked it. I liked that whole bit of like, it's like what, yeah, I think we talked a little about it before, that there is no, that I think the phrase is not quite apt. I think the title is not quite apt, but, that what we consider to be the right wing is no longer conservative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, yeah, and I think we did kind of we talked about that a little bit last week. But yeah, I think that idea that conserve that the value of conserving, now could pop up anywhere in the on the political spectrum is that's an interesting kind of
Well,
a
it's not even the conservatives are still there somewhere in the middle-ish. But what's curious to me is there is this group on the far right who's like, oh no, things were better 150 years ago. Let's go back to that.
mhm. Yeah.
Which generally has not been I can't, I don't know, and maybe it's because I'm not thinking hard enough, but like sit down for a few minutes and think, hey, you know, no one in the Renaissance was saying, hey, you know what? Sargon the Great was doing some really fun things. Let's
Right.
let's fucking go back to that.
Or feudalism
Like,
was
you
kind of
know,
stable and calm. Yeah.
but it's
Isn't that
super
Bronze Age
curious that,
Herbert guy?
or at
Yeah.
least that we have enough history that we could say, although I can find, I dug up a few quotes, they're in the notebook out of the house, but of people in, ancient Latin, first century-ish saying, hey, things were better when, and
Hmm.
almost every 70-year-old on the planet always thinks, oh, it was better when I was a kid,
Hmm.
or things were better when. And generally, and maybe it's Kuhn's theory that, each generation is going to have that, but there's going to be movement or drift regardless when the older generations die out and the new ones take over.
Hmm.
Um, but I'm also now at an age too where the radio stations that were playing the oldies music of my parents are now playing the oldies music of my youth.
Of you, yeah.
You know, and or I watch, Sirius XM satellite and all the 40s on 5, the fifth or the 40s on 4, the 50s on 5 and 60s on 6 are no longer on those stations anymore. They're way up in the 2 or 300s
Wow.
because the people who were listening to those primary stations and the low numbers are
Yeah.
not there and not listening to those stations anymore. And
Hmm.
that's valuable real estate we could
They
be
had to give it
devoting
to
to the
the people who were
kids
listening.
now.
Yep. Yep. So along at the end of that chapter, he also kind of goes into the recognizing BS stuff, and that we're better at recognizing human produced disinformation, but that people in studies tended to believe that AI produced disinformation was accurate. And I wondered if that was just sort of the effect of novelty, right? That when we see enough stuff that sounds the way, the AI slop sounds, we will recognize, we won't be kind of fooled by the fact that it was.
I was listening to something. I spend no time on TikTok, but I was on Instagram the other day and something that was reasonably looked like it could have been AI slop to me. I was listening to, and my daughter from across the room literally said, "Dad, that is slop." She wasn't even looking at the picture. She was just hearing the words and identified it instantaneously and
Good,
said, "Quit, turn it off."
good, good,
Which I
good.
was like, okay, that's,
Good for her.
you
That gives
trained me
me hope
well,
for
but
the generation. Yep.
and I knew it was too, but
Right.
the problem for me was that it was entertaining slop for the minute.
Right. See, but it was baked in that she knew. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. Yeah, and then he kind of goes on from there to that whole thing that we kind of briefly touched on last week too, about sort of counterfeiting humans and bots,
Yeah.
and that there should be some type of, somebody should do something about this. It was kind of
Well,
the.
is he the guy is it a quote from him or is it a quote from somebody else I just saw about that it should be illegal for a bot to present themselves as human?
I think that was the point. That was what he was getting at. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
banning and banning bots. And then he goes on to say that it's a simple issue. It doesn't violate anyone's rights because bots don't have rights, which is
Yeah.
a valuable observation.
The one weird thing too that I noticed as I was reading this, um, there's almost a Luddist knee-jerk reaction against almost every technology when it comes out.
Yep.
And I've even read examples of like the bicycle comes out and people are worried it's gonna excite women because of the way the seat is designed.
Yeah.
Like just wackadoo things.
Yeah.
And that's going to be the bicycle is going to be the downfall of society because,
They
and
should never have let them ride horses.
and we figure it out. And Harari kind of points to this as an example. Some of these things as broad examples.
Yeah.
Um, but we generally are horrible at trying to make laws and litigate against some of the worst problems
Yeah.
until 10, 15, 20, 30 years after these things pop out.
Mm-hmm.
So I even in the typewriter example, people were starting to typewriters would get old and worn out and people were refinishing them and refurbishing them and we needed laws to say this is what is considered a new typewriter and if you're going to refurbish them these are the levels of refurbishment that you can use, and trade laws came into effect to describe what those were and regulate them. But it took 50 years before a lot of that stuff came out and became law
Mhm.
for everyday use of things. And, almost by the time you've done that, typewriters are almost not a thing, and we're into computers, and then we're on to the next thing.
Right.
But what I worry about, and what I think he worries about a little, is the pace of technology has, been on a hockey stick growth curve, and we're still not able to deal with problems and issues in the environment as a result of the Industrial Revolution. It took until the 70s to have the EPA,
Right.
and even now we're still, some crazies are trying to dismantle that to make it easier to make a dime off the environment.
Mhm.
Um, but
Well,
what happens when
and the only
AI
thing we've
speeds up
got
even?
in the digital space is like Section 230, right?
Yeah.
Which doesn't solve all problems. Right. And he does, this, and I guess I just praised him for for this banning bots as a simple issue statement. But even that, I mean, it's not really that simple an issue because, as I suggested, and I think Will, you probably pushed back last week, but that a lot of this bot activity is, on somebody's behalf, right? And it's, it's programmed by somebody, until we get, fully, autonomous, agentic, kind of bot stuff. Most of the stuff that I think we're currently calling bots is, is on somebody's behalf to amplify somebody's message, right? Which at what point does it get to be a First Amendment question? Right? At one point, do we say, well, okay, yes, this is an automated
automated printing
explosion
press.
of this expression, but it is an expression that originates with a person.
Yeah, Eric, you were about to say something. I'm not going to talk over you.
No, and I listened to that a little bit on a walk this morning, and I mean, I'm not sure where the lines are for me, but there's the analogy that I think you're making, Dan, is an individual is creating a message which is then conveyed, I would argue, nefariously or whatever, but it is still on the behalf of an individual. It's not autonomous, not truly autonomous.
Yeah.
And so where does that lie between one type of media and another?
Well, and there is a deception involved in pretending,
Right.
in using a bot to pretend, that I'm just, that this political opinion is not being pushed out there by somebody who is tremendously interested, right? And that seems to be one of the things that bots try to achieve, right?
There's a difference. There's a difference in that there's a difference between publishing something, pushing out a message that I wrote is different from, and okay, is different from programming a bot to generate multiple different versions of this message and put it out very. I mean, there is some complexity there. I do like his solution of, you have to acknowledge it. You have to make it
Clear label and acknowledgement, right?
clear label, but because but even the whole variations. A long time ago, I spent 2 years of my life making spam work well. I think we are outside of the statute of limitations. I'm not going to go into more detail about why I made spam work well, but it was for something I believed in. Anyway, but even if it's not a automation that's doing it, a specific thing that I helped facilitate was if you need to do like 6 different subject lines, somebody would write those 6 different subject lines, and then I would figure out how to get those 6 different subject lines sent out there, right, in these emails. Okay. Or we do the same thing, with A/B testing on headlines on a newspaper. But somebody's writing those and then determining for an algorithm who gets which version. That is different from I'm going to program a bot that is going to write those different versions based on continuous feedback on which one seems to get the most traffic, because there's still that human who's creating the words in the first place, even if they're using versus having I don't know, but I don't know where it is.
But there,
Okay,
In your time period when you were doing that, it requires you as a programmer to spend an hour, multiple hours setting up the program to do that thing. And the return on that investment has to be worth the time to employ you to do that. The difference is now Joe with no programming experience in 10 seconds on Chat GPT can create a bot to do that.
So
And
democratizing it.
he's now the cost of the running the AI to do that is huge, but he doesn't see that. And that's not being paid right. That's a piece of the economy that's not being paid right now. But Joe can do it, in seconds, whether it's
Democratization
worth it or not.
of that is I got
Is
no
it?
I don't have an issue with the democratization, but I do think the plain speaking of, you know, I as an individual, here's where I would put it differently. I think goes to like sort of what he's talking about, and what Section 230 and other things too is, I wrote this message, versus I wrote this message. I a human wrote this message, and I am responsible for it. So, Section 230's whole situation of, Facebook's using an algorithm to promote something. The algorithm itself is something that people are responsible for. It's separate. I feel like, you you can only you have to be. Geez, I'm lost. I don't know where to go with this.
Okay, let's go somewhere else. Let's
Yeah.
let's go to the
That's
towards
fine.
the end. He talks about religion, right? And he's talking about this global mind body split, which I which just sort of caught me by surprise. I was sort of like, wait a minute, where are we going now? I mean, and he starts talking about, he starts talking about Jesus as a historical character, and um, I found that whole thing just really, you know, really odd.
Where was this?
It's in a section called the global mind body split in chapter, I think it's chapter 11. And
We
the
skipped right over all the data,
Yeah,
the
page
data colonialism stuff.
377, Will.
Yeah, I see it. Yeah, but the data colonialism stuff, by the way, was awesome.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. The what if, his whole what if situation, which is interesting. Yeah, and sort of, yeah, that was cool. I liked that. I thought it was interesting. Um, I think it's very interesting.
Okay.
Because yeah, it's. I mean, I don't know if I necessarily agree with. I mean, I don't know if there's something to agree with there or disagree with, but I think this idea of, okay, you have this conception of, you know, I mean, he starts it with, okay, is there, do you have a soul that's separate from your corpus, right? Or is there an afterlife or is there not? That's, but that he's not saying, oh, one or the other. He's saying that there are these two diverging, sort of, worldviews.
Yeah.
And that even goes back to that. That's sort of where he's going with some other stuff too.
Well, I'm kind of surprised there wasn't more of a question of, because he's talked about intersubjective realities
Mhm.
a lot and those ideas.
Yeah.
And there's no proof one way or the other that there is a soul or that there isn't a soul. So it's an intersubjective reality that we decide, yes, there is one, and everyone agrees that there is, but that's because of how it's constructed. Is it any better or worse than, you know,
Well,
witchcraft
see, and
and
maybe
doing witches?
maybe I didn't get really where he was going with this because I was so sort of put off by, the way he was doing it, because I don't necessarily agree that, that there is a soul. And, and so, I mean, so kind of my takeaway from it maybe that's something that will distinguish the humans from the machines in the future if we do get a really, AGI that's not just generative from the all of the crap that humans have put out there, that the machines will potentially be more fact-based and evidence-based, and not as amenable to sort of working within this intersubjective reality that everyone has accepted on really the strength of narrative rather than evidence.
I mean, I think he's going the opposite way actually with that, in terms of that where he's going with the mind body split or whatever is more, I think, when you get a actual AGI, they could theoretically be people, because that's sort of corresponding to what a soul is. That sort of the thing he's contrasting that to is people are people because we have bodies. We have flesh and blood bodies with the DNA and everything, and that core that's what makes us people. And whether or not we even really have a brain, whether or not with our mind is just some sort of thing that is just the collection of the electrical impulses in here, but it's really just part of our body, as opposed to sort of the idea of a soul being separate, and that you don't have that your body isn't you, your mind is you. That's the other approach. And if AGI can be a you as well, because it doesn't matter if they've got a human body, they have that mind. I think that's what it's saying.
The small example is the 3D projection at the Shoah Foundation, where they had a survivor of the Holocaust answer thousands of questions with 500 cameras and a 360 plus 4D version, and they record him, so you can go to the Shoah Foundation and ask him questions about all kinds of random things, and you'll see a pre-recorded answer to them. But there's only so much you can do with that limitation. But with AI, social media can collect data on me through my whole life, and then you can potentially posit who would I be. But there's also the Brownian motion of things that happen in your life that dramatically, a fire comes along and changes the direction of my life. Potentially dramatically or simply, or just I think that actually he used an example of, you're reading this page right now, and because you're reading it, that's changing you.
Right.
It's the Heraclitus is, you don't step into the same river twice.
Right. And he was using a specific sort of neuroscience idea that neuronal connections are actually being constructed at the point. See, I'm more a sort of amenable will to the idea that embodied experience is going to be an important difference, and that might be a route to something closer to personhood for artificial intelligences.
Okay.
I don't.
So if you put the bot if you put the AI in a physical corpus, doesn't even have to be humanoid,
right?
But something that can experience and interact with the world.
Yeah.
Then it can be. And again, I'm comfortable. I think that's. I'm just trying to go where he said what. I'm just trying to. But I think you got a good point.
I'm more, and I think he did mention that along the way too. But the thing that I don't. The thing that where it sort of came unconnected for me in this section, this whole soul section, is I think that he's sort of trading on popular, sort of consensual understandings of these ideas, that we can, if we wanted to, we can trace them back to, to Enlightenment, philosophers and stuff like that. But, it's sort of almost, it strikes me as almost sort of a reliance on a kind of a pop culture understanding of, of this dualism, this mind-body split.
Or how do you, and there are examples in science fiction. The first thing that pops into my head is the movie Short Circuit, you got Johnny Five, this, hero that everybody loves by the end of the movie, and he sacrifices himself and dies. But oh, hey, we can take all the things that made him him and put him back into another robot potentially,
Hmm.
maybe. And that's we see that in cinema. There's probably a dozen movies that
when
take
when
that
when you
trope.
were raising the Shoah Foundation, I didn't actually hear Shoah, and I thought you were talking about Foundation, the TV show, where
Oh,
we have this whole character, by Jared. That is exactly what we're talking about here. Because I was like, oh yeah, that perfect example. Isn't that a person?
but the lower level example is this last week, Amazon said,
Yeah.
we're going to take the store and some functionality away from your old Kindle, which assuredly still works. So what is the lifetime of a an instrument?
Mhm.
And this is it's a very, very, very low, low, low level AI.
Hmm.
It has an institutional memory of all the things I've read and annotated over the last, almost 2 decades,
Hmm.
because they came out roughly in 2006-ish. But essentially it's going to be a brick in a week or two. Not
Right.
this particular one. This is a
A
newer version.
jailbreak.
I have older ones that are in the other room that, like, okay, this corporation decided I'm going to kill
They could be jailbreak.
this, and embodied kind of cognition, non-cognition. But it's for me, it's the memory, and it's got a memory of the things I've read and annotated, and all that goes away if I don't transplant the brain from my old Kindle and put it into my new Kindle.
Hmm.
Um, is that death? Is that murder? Is that, and that kind of mind body split? How do you define murder
Does
philosophically?
does personhood require mortality?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
every other person is going to have an end of life.
Hmm. Except corporate persons.
Well, there's the problem, right? There's one of the problems. I think again that got raised too. It's like I think he raised that as well as
Right.
about corporate persons.
Right. Well, and that's the path to to legal personhood for
Yeah,
AIs is by becoming corporations and then having the 14th Amendment to fall back on. But
but mortality,
what's that?
but being able to be killed or
Yeah.
dying or just dying of old age
Yeah.
or whatever or dying of obsolescence. I mean, isn't that what mortality fundamentally is? Is obsolescence and wear?
Yeah. So if your AI is in a current computer and the memory on that computer has a span of 10 years and then it's gone, and then does that mean that AI then is dead and you need to start all over with a new one? They're certainly going to evolve. And we've already been through Chat GPT 3 and 4 and 4.1, and you know, where does the life of the AI?
Mm.
So even those, I mean, isn't there like memory fundamentally? There's a limit to how many sort of the history that an individual instance really has. It's
Mhm.
depending on how much memory you buy and how
Well,
many.
oh, and then there's the the what are the memories of thing, right? Because he, in a different context, he sort of brings up this idea from the primatologist Franz de Waal, right? Veneer theory, where he says that that we grew up as Stone Age hunters and we can't avoid seeing the world as a jungle where the strong prey upon the weak and where might makes right. And then de Waal's theory is that our myths and our rituals and all of this has sort of laid over that as a way of camouflaging this underlying reality. Well, to the extent that these AIs are not going to have shared that evolutionary experience, um, what are they going to make of these myths and rituals and narratives that lay on top of this that they will have access to?
And he has one of the kind of overarching themes of the book has been the ideas of truth versus myth and how that dovetails with how we decide to create order in our lives and societies together. Because you as an individual could create and go off into the wilderness and have your own life and do what you choose to do all by yourself. But I think what makes human life a lot more interesting is that it's done in shared community with other people. So being most people are don't go off and be hermits.
Mhm. Well, and
Um,
I think that brings us back to what I thought was really the central points at the very beginning. It was this, this dichotomy between understanding the world as it is and creating and maintaining order, right? Which are, he sort of described as kind of two really distinct things that
Well,
happen.
yes, and yes, there's also a related thing that he gets into multiple times, which is there can be multiple understandings of the world as it is. Different culture, different, you know, rule sets
Mhm.
for different societies or whatever. Will have different understandings of what the world is.
Right,
You know,
right.
of
But
reality is.
but I also got from that the idea that there is something different about, even if people differ on what they think the rule sets are, that they are in fact actually trying to discern what the rules really are rather than imposing something that is convenient or is beneficial for them, or for whatever other reason they're imposing the order on the world with less kind
yeah.
of regard to sort of updating it based on new
But
evidence, new data.
and that's one of the weird paradoxes here too is our and one of the problems with biases in the training data that an AI has to make decisions and outputs is it's all very cisgender white guy, heavily biased,
Mhm.
versus if we go back and look at David Graeber's version of, there are millions of societies and they all decide amongst each other using some prior generation's experience how they're going to live now.
Yeah.
And you don't have all the information to know that there are other societies living other ways somewhere else, and you have to choose how you want to live yourself now, given the constraints. So if you're a slave, it's hard to break the system of slavery because you don't have that experience. And it's harder than to also create that, you know, interconceptual reality to make all the people around you realize, oh, wait, slavery is not maybe the best thing we could be doing.
Mhm.
But an AI potentially could, knowing about all those other realities, calculate through millions of options potentially with some guardrails and have a better goal to
Well,
find utopia. But my
else,
presumption is Harari has made the point that thousands and thousands of years of philosophy and we still can't come to an idea of what utopia really could or should be. And
right.
it's guaranteed, even if there were a utopia, there's going to be one individual within that utopia who doesn't really feel that way and wants something else. And how do you deal with that?
Right. Well, and it's Asimov's three laws, being sort of, circumvented by the zeroth law. Uh,
Yeah.
and who controls at what level of global abstraction, kind of we position ourselves. And Harari, unfortunately, I'm looking at kind of the end of chapter 11 now, where he goes off on this harangue about how bad Putin is, and and clearly is unable to sort of get out of his sort of little time and space.
Well, and that's another thing too is with when we talk about mortality, Trump is only going to last so long. Putin is only going to last so long.
Yeah.
Even the ideas that they stand for will only last so long. Eventually, they'll be washed away or replaced, or, maybe I shouldn't say replaced because replacement theory is very triggering to those people. Um, but eventually they end and something comes after them. But the bigger issue, and I don't know that he really hammers on it, is an AI could live forever, in which case you have no hope, or it's a lot less hope that the AI version of what life should be for you
Mhm.
gets wiped away, such that there is some other new reality for your children or your children's children.
Mhm.
That's what pitchforks are for. Torches and pitchforks.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. He comes back, and in the epilogue, he kind of comes back to Tiberius. We sort of passed over, sort of the Tiberius story
Yeah,
earlier on in chapter 9 or 10,
I
uh,
like that one.
right, where he kind of created a vulnerability for himself, which is an interesting metaphor.
Yeah. And he talked,
Well,
yeah, the dictator's dilemma or whatever. He talks about, where, you know, that the AI the AI would be, it would want to lie to you. If you set your AI to tell, of course it would tell you only what you want to hear. And now you're captured by it. It's fundamentally that's what's happening in Wall-E, right? On the
yeah.
boat.
I
They're
saw
just
a little snippet of our favorite philosopher, Jimmy Carr, this week, who said that he was talking about jokes and jesters, court jesters, and the function they serve. And
Mm,
he said, it's one of there's apparently a story out there that the reason that the Great Wall of China is not painted is because the emperor went out and saw it and said, "Oh yeah, we should totally paint this and make it prettier." And the court jester looked at him and jokingly was the only one to be the no man amidst all the yes men. And he would said, if you painted this thing, the amount of resources and time and energy will bankrupt the empire, and you totally shouldn't do that. And so it was because the court jester was willing to say no that the Great Wall of China is not painted.
oh,
Yeah. Whether that's a true story or not, but it was an interesting little bit of,
I mean, that's a very British analogy, right? I mean, what is the
yeah,
Bridge of Fife that is never completed being painted? By the time they go from one end to the other, by the time they get to the other end, they have to start again.
the
yeah.
Golden Gate Bridge too.
Sorry?
The Golden Gate Bridge also.
Yeah, right,
mm,
sure.
yeah.
Um, I would, I, what kills me every week is, watching Jimmy Carr snippets of comedy while we read these books
Yeah,
is,
Yeah.
they tie back.
Yeah. Yeah. He's every once in a while he'll throw out, even sometimes just in his crowd work, right? He'll throw out the title of a book, and I'll be like, oh God, I should maybe go check that out.
yeah, he's a well-read guy.
Yeah.
But I guess that's where you find the funniness and the comedy in life is the knowing.
Hmm.
Um,
Yep.
and it takes a fully formed human being to be funny too, or
Yeah.
to create comedy. Like you might see a 9-year-old mathematical genius because it's all structure, but
Hmm.
you never see a genius 9-year-old stand-up comedian ever. Just doesn't happen
Yeah.
because the amount of humanity it requires. So as soon as you can see an AI come up with an hour of good comedy stand-up material, that's when you know we're
That's
done for.
that's the Turing test, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Yeah. I'm just as we're talking now, I haven't really looked at the end notes before. I'm just kind of scrolling through the end notes. There's a lot of good.
Yeah, but he doesn't give you any good stories in them.
No,
It's just references.
he, yeah. And I looked askance when I read his acknowledgments because, and I don't think it's invalid, but he thinks a team of researchers that work with him. So, you know, his he's the end notes are distilled toward his thinking and they've
Mhm.
informed his thinking, but it's not. I don't believe he's read every text.
Okay.
I did notice
That's
that in
disappointing.
chapter five in notes, he quotes Graeber and Wingro a lot.
I noticed
Yeah,
that. Yeah, I noticed that. I'm just now I'm kind of going
But
through.
in general, I noticed that a lot of the stuff he is mentioning
it fits, right?
are things that I've read or that are popular press.
Mhm.
The one thing I would call him to task for is he's reading a lot of meta stuff that people like Graeber and Wengrow have written bigger books on
Yeah,
rather than reading individual journal articles and primary sources and then spitting out this bigger thesis.
right.
Um,
He did cite the Cesar Hidalgo book that we just read.
did he? How did he do that? Because it didn't come out until I thought that book came out after this one.
I didn't, maybe it wasn't the book we just read then. I
Or
saw,
maybe it was his 2015 book.
I don't know. I thought it was the one. I mean,
But there was a huge amount of overlap with the types of things he's reading and quoting here with the types of things that I know I've personally read, and I presume based on what we as a group read, you know,
my understanding of
I
the
didn't see a
information,
Herbert Hoover White reference, but
yeah, has been deeply influenced by Cesar Hidalgo. Why Information Grows, 2015.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, that's what it is.
I got a question because again, I think we skipped over this. What do you think of the extinction of the smartest?
Oh yeah, let's go back to that.
There does seem to be kind of a thing that an AI is not, when I see what it's doing, it's not reverting necessarily even to the mean, but it's reverting to something below the mean more often than not, which maybe makes me wonder if the mean is actually lower than I think it is potentially.
Hmm.
But there, I'll just quote the movie Idiocracy.
Yeah,
You know,
Yeah. Well, and it does seem that as as it becomes more recursive, right, and as it's using inputs from previous generative AI outputs, then that does seem to kind of converge on a strange place.
doesn't this actually get us sort of back to, I hate to say it, Pinker?
Yeah.
When he's talking about that reversion to the mean stuff is one of the few things I thought was sort of interesting about the Pinker book was
Mhm.
his, the sort of the prediction, this figuring out markets, by whatever actually really sort of going for the lowest common denominator. I'm misremembering that too, I'm sure, but
Yeah. Well, I've always sort of thought that was sort of the flaw of generative AI was that it did, by going, to the peak of the normal curve, it was limiting its usefulness beyond, being just a bigger and more accessible encyclopedia.
yeah,
there also is the idea that humans are really horrible with statistics and predictions and prediction markets in general. But an AI could remove that human bias to look at big data sets and come up with better outcomes.
Mhm.
And one of the things I want to say I wrote it down probably somewhere in chapter 9 this week earlier was he talks about AI might create better health outcomes or better drugs or better whatever.
Mhm.
When you think about where we are in American society and healthcare is better than a lot of other countries on the planet. But even for as good as it is, when you think about it, we really are horrible about it. Our
Yeah.
public health is dreadful. We're eating all the wrong things. We mismanage our food resources. We could be eating way better,
Mhm.
way healthier, way more creatively invented and inventively,
Mhm.
and yet we don't
Well,
because we have all these foibles that make it that much harder, much less how somebody in some foreign country is eating the same four things week in and week out just to survive.
right.
But and yes, an AI could make it better potentially, but if all the problems that make us not eat well in America now are what they are, an AI is going to have to be phenomenally great to move the needle on making our horrible diets that much better or more efficient or more whatever. Um,
Well, I think that there are two. I mean, two things sort of jump out at me in that context. One of them is his Harari's Go example, right? That, going down, that the Go masters had been sort of channeled into this, into these sort of thinkable thoughts, and and that the AI was able to kind of blast past that to to sort of a different. I mean, it struck me that the metaphor of kind of local maxima. And having to go down the hill to get to the next higher one, but then also I wonder, with what you're saying, Chris, about these, about the ability of, I mean, not even AI, but just, statistical apps to see correlations that people hadn't noticed. I mean, that's been, I mean, there is all kinds of, business case studies about how, how well, Amazon has done that and that sort of thing, just based on having, this big data accessible. But I guess my question is, will there, at least in the short term, be a difference that needs to be addressed by humans to distinguish between correlations and causality, right? And what tools do you have to employ to actually discern causation in, these correlated chains of events or systems? I think that might be, a niche for, for humans for a little while at least. Oh, cool. Jimmy Carr said something about Nexus.
No, it's not specifically, but it's on the topics that Nexus touches on, really.
Ooh, nice. All
I
right.
think one of the things he talks about is that, and I have thought about it too, is, or I've seen examples in historical studies that, ancient Rome was essentially spending 20% of all their resources on military and keeping order, which is a huge number. And compared to what the US spends on it now, we're much smaller. But and I think in that example, Carr talks about what the cost to this to run the Stasi was,
Mhm.
in the mid-century. And versus now with what we have with surveillance, the cost of running the Stasi goes way, way down.
Oh,
So
yeah.
you got to really worry, like, hey, if you flip the wrong switch, suddenly you've not only have you got the Stasi, but it's really cheap to do.
Yep. Yep. I think I have heard him say something like that. Yeah. Yeah, it's a scary set of thoughts. Yeah, that we can have, and then it's sort of like a choose your dystopia thing, right?
Yeah.
So if we go with one side, we get what we've got now, but if we went with the other side, we might end up with, a social credit system around, carbon or something. Um, or a new, and then once there's a new pandemic, then all bets are off.
Well, that's the thing too, is running an AI right now is so expensive from an energy perspective.
Mhm.
The question is, does it pan out and play better for the long run? And he makes it may have been chapter 6 or 7, somewhere around there. He talks about when you do the calculus for human happiness, do you calculate only for the happiness of people now, or do you calculate for the happiness of people later? And more often, when you calculate for the happiness of people later, it allows people in the now to do really horrible things, like, oh, let's kill whole classes of people because that'll be better for people in the future
Mhm.
who don't exist. And,
Right.
generally
Right.
it's racist and, all kinds of other horrible.
Right.
But if a carbon credit system were in place, you'd really have to show super value in AI to say, hey, yes, let's do this, let's run this,
Yeah.
make it as an experiment. Or would we ever have spent the money to do cryptocurrency and Bitcoin because the cost of running that is
It's huge.
tremendously high?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't, it's kind of funny. I don't watch the All In podcast anymore because they've just gotten, so incredibly obnoxious that I can't even stand to listen to them. But I did see, I mean, it still pops up on my YouTube feed, and the headlines on it, and I didn't watch it this week, had something to do with 30 states, and I'm sure they're going to be very upset about it. 30 states have banned data centers, they say, or are in the process of banning data centers to some extent or another. Like I said, I didn't watch it, so I don't know the details. But that would be an interesting kind of a development.
Well, the big question now, I think, in a lot of these data center things is they want to they move into communities and they build infrastructure and usually take massive tax breaks to do that in those communities.
Right.
And those communities don't realize that, oh, my electric bill is going to pentuple.
Right.
And I, as an individual user, am going to pay the majority of that instead of the
Or-
company moving in and using all that energy. They should be the one paying their fair share.
The worst one is actually, I know the data center, the story that I recently saw, a data center actually is generating their own power.
Mhm.
And they've got these extremely loud gas turbines going.
But that's the
power.
Memphis, the XAI Memphis.
Yeah, Karen Howard
I think
talked about it.
yeah,
Just made the neighborhood uninhabitable.
uninhabitable.
From
Unlivable,
noise.
yeah. Yep.
Well, but there's the other example, and I think when we were doing How, I shared the search engine podcast two-parter about that.
Mm-hmm.
But the power that they were drawing was actually not from the community that was getting the economic benefit. They're actually drawing power and increasing electricity rates of a community 30 miles away, which is where they were getting their power feed from.
Yeah.
So it's not even your community that's
Power is fungible, just like money.
Well, and that's the thing is whoever the company is that's putting that thing in place there
XAI.
does not have the CEO living right next to that plant.
Correct.
It's making
Right.
all
It was
the
an
noise
impoverished
causing
neighborhood that
problems.
has been overlooked for a generation.
Yes.
Right. And from that perspective, to historicize it a little bit, it's just like, an Amazon warehouse coming in, or before, the generation before that, it's just like a Walmart.
This was a former, I think it was like a former Whirlpool factory, which provided many jobs because of the nature of manufacturing at the time in the 1950s, and now is just a data center with, I don't know, 30 people managing it or something, right?
Oh, I'm curious because and as a kid, I drove from Georgia to Illinois every summer, and I went by the big main Whirlpool factory, I think in Indiana.
Hmm.
I want to say so. I got to go back and take my kid on that car ride one summer just to say this is what I did every year. I'll go out, see if I can go out and find and rent a big Ford LTD and pack 8 people into it and say, all right, here's our igloo cooler with sandwiches and we're going.
Nice.
This is what it was like.
I would just
someday I'll drive Route 66 and see what's there.
You actually can't. There are big swaths of Route 66 now that are dirt road or cordoned off. It's
all right.
We just
from Kentucky to California, I thought, oh, I'll do bits and pieces of it. So I got off every now and then to try it, and you go 5 miles, and then suddenly the road just stops.
Oh, really? That's too bad.
Yeah.
I saw Illinois or Chicago redeclared where Route 66 starts. It now starts at Navy Pier, which it never touches. So.
Yeah. Well, there's the middle of Pasadena is Colorado Boulevard is the old Route 66.
Oh, yeah.
And it's the main business thoroughfare through Pasadena now, and probably in part because businesses grew up around Route 66, but it's not, it's it's a 4-lane road for a big swath, and you see the occasional historic signs, but not a single person in town calls it Route 66, or probably half of town probably doesn't even know that it used to be Route 66.
Wow.
Except for the little old lady in Pasadena with her muscle car.
Yep. No. Well, okay. We have done it. Any last words on our Nexus adventure?
I liked it.
It was good.
I liked it.
I liked it too.
It was a worthwhile. There were points where I thought it was. I felt like there were points where I felt he was writing more than I wanted him to. It's not like a dump your Zettelkasten book entirely, but it felt stretched at points.
Yeah.
On the other hand, the conversation was it brought enough to conversation that maybe that emotional response was inaccurate.
I agree. I agree with that. It did bring a lot to the conversation, and it's a lot, and there's a lot for me to kind of go back to, and sort of reconcile with my worldview. I did feel he occasionally strayed, from scholarship to pop
Mm.
culture, pop history, but not in a way that ruined it for me. I guess I
He's a
just
medieval historian, really, anyway, right?
That's
They
what his
said,
claims, yeah.
yeah, he's not, that's his background is not particularly
yeah.
about
I know,
this
but you use
stuff.
the same tools.
I think for me, the thing I like about it is it's dense enough and there's so much stuff here that it's going to require another read in six
Yeah,
months or a
Yeah.
year to
Yep.
right.
continue unpacking some of the things. But
Well, but won't that be like your second and a half read, Chris? Didn't
I think I'm probably 2.5 reads in already,
Oh,
just
okay.
with the time we've spent doing it, because think I've
Mhm.
gone through the audiobook twice and
Jeez.
I've read I think almost all of it,
Yeah.
words on a page.
Yeah.
I think my next read will have to be a digital version to like try and
Right.
jam all the stuff in and extract.
Mhm. Yeah.
Different river.
Yeah.
Dan, you said something about bringing something to the conversation, and what I liked actually specifically about it, really more was that he was, I thought, generally not trying to say this is the way it is or
Mhm.
that is the way it is.
Mhm.
Here are
Some ideas.
some ideas and how they fit together, how they fit or contrast with each other.
Some
Yeah.
framings. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And fair frame. I thought
Exactly.
reasonably fair framings.
So, and I was asked this. I was discussing, I don't know, lunch table conversation at work. What are you reading? Uh, and I'm going to ask you this question, Dan, because I haven't decided for myself. Does this warrant going back to *Sapiens* and trying to finish it?
Ooh.
I'm
I
so
couldn't give I couldn't
sorry
Maybe
give a
that I
straight
did
answer to
Sapiens.
not.
that
Maybe
question. So.
Sapiens. Homo
I
Deus
liked.
bugged me, but Sapiens I liked, so I might return.
Did you finish *Sapiens*?
I did not.
The last third of it is the best part.
Right. And I quit at the first half.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think my issue with that is it's too much a book written by somebody in Western, like only Western culture.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
And he doesn't even delve into other cultures at all within respect.
I think
And I
that
want to see, but I don't think there is a non-Western culture version of what that book is.
Hmm. Now that you
Um,
mention it, I did. That's what I remember about it. It was kind of celebratory.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
and the perspective,
Which is not to say
particularly
that
from,
stuff shouldn't be celebrated, but it's
yeah.
not the only stuff that should.
Right.
But I guess maybe now, I guess maybe when I was, when I read it was probably peak wokeness, and I thought, well, okay, this is a little obnoxious, but maybe now I'd feel differently.
Well, the stuff that really, I think actually, is I don't think I realized until reading like the afterword or something of this book that he was a medieval historian.
Mm.
Again, the part that most interested me when he's talking about the rise of modern of economics, which happens during the late medieval period, and then through sort of that, so it was in his wheelhouse of when he's talking about fundamentally, you know,
Yeah, and
growth.
I'll go back to that because I remember kind of objecting a little bit to that, and and probably sort of on the basis of me being more closer to agreement with like David Graeber in Debt, but I don't think maybe those two positions are irreconcilable.
Yeah. Well, for me, a lot of these things is not even the bigger story that's told here, but the smaller individual pieces to pull out. So things like concepts like, intersubjective realities
Mhm.
is a fascinating like subtopic
Yeah,
that you can then apply to 50 other things and what does believing in, something like witchcraft and,
Or
killing
capitalism.
or capitalism or just the economy and the value of a dollar,
yeah.
How do those things so dramatically affect or even a lot of the core principles of what our religion are
Yeah.
things we just have agreed to we've decided, oh, there's such a thing as a soul, or a
Right.
thing we can call a soul, whether you believe in it or not.
Yeah.
It's a thing, and
Well,
you have to know
and
what
everybody
it is.
knows what you're talking about when you refer
Right.
to it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Or
yeah,
even
and maybe
deciding
that's
about. Go ahead.
maybe that's really the most important thing is, sort of that issue of intersubjective realities being taken for objective realities.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for me, it's those ideas are really, or broadly pushing them out. And you're more likely to come to this book and say, I'm going to read it because AI is a thing, and I'm
Mhm.
reading it for the AI piece.
Yeah.
But what are the sub pieces, or even in the chapter 9, this framework of benevolence and decentralization?
Mhm.
Not only what is that list, but what is maybe a longer list, and what does that list look like? Or where do societies and cultures and polities fit with respect to that list in their own realities?
Mhm.
You know, what if you looked at that list, and you made a graph of all those axes, what does Sargon the Great's version look like versus Julius Caesar's versus,
Yeah. 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 Those would be interesting ways of kind of sizing up or comparing societies or cultures.
and then can you morally say one is better than another because of where it sits on all those axes?
Mhm.
Yeah, she had it already.
I don't think he gets. Well, that's I think the thing that's interesting. He doesn't really get into morality much at all, or he does a little bit.
Well, he did kind of dip his toe into sort of that deontology versus utilitarian
Yeah.
question.
Yeah, when he says, you could, you could be a deontologist or a utilitarian Nazi and still find a way to justify,
Yeah.
you know,
Well, and that's the thing too, and I think he used that argument to say, hey,
Yeah.
humans playing in the world for thousands of years have still not figured these things out, and
Mhm.
and AI is probably just as likely to make the same or similar mistakes.
Well, that's the big question, isn't it?
But that,
Is it going
at the
to?
same time, the number, every week I see at least one article or one thing served up to me.
Yeah.
And even when I try not to look at them, or I cognizantly choose not to look at them to feed the algorithms that are feeding me these things in the first place. But the story that people in Norway are happier by most measures, or people in Sweden, but given that, like, how is it that Americans decide, hey, we know these people are happier than us. Why don't we choose to live that way instead of the way we're living?
Mhm.
And in fact, somebody posted this week because college acceptances have come out, and I'm in the Johns Hopkins Reddit, and there's a bunch of students saying, "Is it really as bad as everyone says? Are people so unhappy they like to complain about how bad they've got it
Mhm.
socially or whatever, or like they're studying too much, or they're doing this or they're doing that?" And it's kind of like, well, yeah, but people like to complain about what a horrible lot in life they've got.
Right.
Yeah. That's
just who we are as
what else
people.
you can talk about?
When you put a lot of those types of people together in one university where it's a little harder than the average university, everybody's going to go crazy. Oh, this is so hard.
It's a status thing.
And it becomes a self-reinforcing, like, but the problem is that then leaks outside the borders of the walls to the general public who are like, oh, do I really want to go there or not?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. So next week,
And how far do we think we want to go? Does
do we
anybody
want to go?
Looks like
have a copy?
Let me
Is
look.
it Will, do you have a copy of this book?
I do not. I'm going to go check the New York Public Library and see if it's got one for me.
I'm going to see if I can look at this.
Congo Public Library had a copy as well. It looks like book
Years
one
ago.
is about 100 and some
Book
pages.
one looks like about 127 pages.
Sounds good. Hey, I mean, biographies are pretty easy.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
like
Why don't we
That's what
do that?
dates and
That's-
idea. Yeah. this will, I'm
We'll
sure this
take
will
the
be
first
a brief.
chunk and see how it flows.
There are
right?
5 books, so why don't we try book 1?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Oh yeah, it's 752 pages all in.
Yeah, but how much of that is endnotes?
Oh yeah, oh big chunk.
Once someone has a physical copy, we'll know.
It will be
Probably 75 pages.
Acknowledges begin at 6:15. Yeah, so
And
but
then
it's
the,
narrative, right? So it'll
Right.
be easier. So,
Yeah.
All right. Excellent.
All right, y'all.
Sorry I was late.
I mean,
Oh,
Yeah.
we,
Thank you all.
great
What
seeing you guys.
Glad we found the pieces.
yeah,
I hope we
and,
get.
and the doc.
I hope. I hope you'll send out that mailing list or thing because let people know because
Yeah.
I will.
I mean I like talking to you guys. Maybe yeah, this sounds like it's a little change.
Yeah, I
Well,
will.
and hopefully
I'll
Tim feels up to coming back too, right? So,
That too.
although, will he want? I mean, if we do this, I'm just going to play Tim for a moment. We should think about doing one of the Rory Stewart books that he's been discussing, which I'm game for myself because I like Rory Stewart. I think he's an interesting character.
Yeah.
All right.
But we got lots of books to read,
We got a lot of books to read. Yep, there's a lot of books out there.
and not enough years.
All right. Thank you very much.
Right.
See ya.